Also developing further afield in the UK, Prince Phillip being laid to rest today in a private ceremony for about 30 mourners. In fact, a minute of silence will be observed at the start of his funeral service in honor of him. He was, of course, the Duke of Edinburgh and died at the age of 99. For more on what to make of this, let's bring in Henry Ridgewel, correspondent for Voice of America, joining us now via our video link. Henry, great to chat to you. Thanks so much for making time for us. It's quite an important moment for the UK, isn't it? Because whilst this is a private ceremony, there is a very public debate about the legacy that Prince Philip leaves behind.
There is, absolutely. This is a man who has been at the Queen's side for 73 years marriage. He's been ever present within the royal family. And he's had a very important role within the family itself and within the Commonwealth, of course. And so Britain is losing somebody who's been at the forefront of the nation for decades now. So it's a moment for the people of Britain to mark the passing of a man who's left a very bright, indelible legacy on the country, and who also leaves behind a royal family in transition, let's not forget. And the Queen will be in the chapel today herself on her own because of those social distancing regulations. And I think the ceremony will underline the personal loss for her. The ceremony has changed very much from the original plans because of the pandemic, when there were intended to be thousands of members of the public allowed into the grounds of Windsor Castle. Instead, there will be several hundred members of the armed forces lining the route from the castle to St George's Chapel within the grounds, and then 30 members of the royal family allowed into the St George's Chapel building for the ceremony itself. And as you say, the whole nation will be marking this. There will be a minute's silence held at the beginning of the ceremony itself at 3 o'clock local time. Sports fixtures have been rearranged in the country so they don't clash with the funeral. For example, planes have been stopped landing at nearby Heathrow Airport, so that silence will be complete at Windsor Castle this afternoon. But as the personal ceremony for the royal family is marked this afternoon, as you say, a moment for the royal family for reflection as well. It's had a difficult few years, not least through Prince Philip's grandson, Prince Harry, leaving formal duties within the royal family with his wife Meghan and moving to the United States. You'll no doubt remember that interview with Oprah Winfrey that he conducted a couple of months ago in the United States, where there were allegations made of racism within the royal family. Prince Harry will be attending the ceremony itself. He flew in about a week ago back into Britain, his first visit back to the country since he left last year for Canada and then California. It's believed he's not met several members of the royal family. He's not met his brother since he landed in the country because of those social distancing regulations and quarantine. The first time he's due to meet Prince William, we believe, will be on the steps of Windsor Castle as the procession begins this afternoon.
Yeah.
There is talk here that this is a moment for reconciliation and healing within the family itself after several rifts in recent years.
Yeah, one can imagine how this is an opportunity to do exactly that. But it's also an opportunity to try place the influence, the role of the monarch within not only the UK community, but the international community as a whole. And I'm asking this on the back of apparently UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson actually not attending today. The intention is more noble than it sounds. It's apparently because he wanted to open up a seat for a member of the family to be able to be in attendance. But the optics become quite poetic, don't they? Especially insofar as the criticism that the monarch has received in recent weeks.
Yes, that's right. So it's going to be a very different, a very personal ceremony. Those in attendance within the chapel include 30 members of the royal family, but also members of Prince Philip's wider family. Don't forget, he traces his lineage back to the royal families of Denmark, Greece, Russia and Britain, and so they will be represented as well in the chapel. And as you say, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, declining an invitation to attend the ceremony to give up his seat for members of the family itself. We know that Prince Philip had a colourful life just through the headlines that he generated within the newspapers here There were occasions when some of his remarks did cause offence. There were accusations of racism within some of the remarks that he said and some of his attitudes. Defenders of the monarch and the royal family say he was a man of his times, that none of this was heartfelt, and if you look deeply into the man's life and how he engaged with other nations, other communities and individuals around the world, that it reveals a man who was deeply interested in other races, other peoples, other cultures. He took a great interest in different faiths around the world and wrestled intensely within himself for his own faith, and I think a lot of that will be reflected in the ceremony itself today. So yes, this is a moment that the royal family, that the nation will be watching the royal family mourn the loss of one of its own. But there are, it has to be said, people in Britain and of course elsewhere in the Commonwealth and around the world who are questioning the continued role of the royal family. What role does it play in this country? Does it accurately reflect society? And this debate that I mentioned before about Prince Harry and Meghan, and we're seeing a sort of generational divide open up in this country, and that's going to be a difficult one for the royal family to overcome. From what I've witnessed in recent weeks, we've seen several of the older generations, defending the royal family intensely and mourning Prince Philip and his passing. And we've seen, on the other hand, younger generations connecting more closely with Prince Harry and Meghan and the work that they are doing around things like representation, diversity, climate change.
Absolutely.
And it was originally seen that Prince Harry and Prince William were going to bridge this divide. And now with those rifts in the family, that's difficult. And somehow they've got to connect to the younger generation. So today is going to be a really interesting day. Not only, a huge personal day of grief for the Queen and the royal family, but a watershed moment, I think, for the royal family itself as well, as it is viewed by billions of people probably around the world. Absolutely.
And the big question, I guess, becomes what does it mean for the future of the monarch and its influence itself? Henry, thanks very much indeed for that much-needed context. Really some food for thought for us here on the Tip of Africa. Thanks very much indeed.